excuse to eat that chocolate ice cream that's in the freezer, the Ben & Jerry's. You can come up with an excuse every day why that day was different than the day before. This unbelievably tough day. You know, we had to be at this conference. Geez, I don't know. It seemed like 4:30 in the morning. You know, okay? You can always think of an excuse you need. And so the tyranny of the moment is that any given moment you can essentially make the decision you want to by justifying it. I had an interesting experience. Might have been a year or so ago. I was at some convention, and the opening speaker in the morning was one of the guys who'd lost all the weight for the Biggest Loser competition. I think he'd done maybe a couple years ago or something. And then I was the last speaker, just before lunch. And so we finished, and I was getting ready to fly out, and we were going to have lunch together. And we had lunch, we sat down, and we were eating normal lunch. He's a fun guy, and he's big guy, really nice looking guy. I think he must spend about 20 hours in the gym every day. And we're talking, and right in the middle of talking, he'd say, "You notice how I didn't take a roll?" Yeah, no, I wasn't noticing actually. And he goes, "You notice how I ordered chicken, even though I like beef better?" I'm like, I didn't know that either. Yeah. And there's like 3 or 4 things that came up like this. Do you notice that I cut my serving in half and pushed the other half of my plate before I even started? And after about the 3rd time he said something, I started saying, you know, I don't think he's saying this stuff to me. I think he's saying this stuff to remind himself or to reinforce to himself some patterns that he is really struggling to keep. And that is one alternative for a diabetic to maybe keep their weight down or to lose weight. It is a hard road to hoe. It's much easier to set up something or set up your environment or your scripts so they become mindless. Let's take a look at this ripple effect of consistency. You know, if your environment causes you to overeat, I mean, the obvious thing is to change your environment so it doesn't. Okay, if you pour too much on a big plate than a smaller plate, well, just get rid of your big plate. Don't say, "Must not overserve." Okay, big bowls cause you to pour more, use small ones. Wide glasses cause you to pour too much, use narrow ones. Eye little foods in the cabinet make you 30% more likely to take the first thing you see. Well, make sure the first thing you see is something good, not super frosty O's. Well, we want to look at how different environmental tweaks compare to the more traditional advice that's often given that's willpower based. So what we did is we took 10 environmental tips that were tremendous in the lab that I talked about in mindless eating, and we took 10 that were kind of favorites for that are given by nutritionists when they want people to lose weight. We took 2,000 people who had come to the website mindlesseating.org and randomly assigned them 3 changes. And then what we did is we tracked them over 3 months. Actually, at the end of every week, they got an email. At the end of every month, they got a phone call. And we tracked their self-reported weight and a bunch of other stuff for about 3 months. And this is out this month in Physiology and Behavior. But there's a couple interesting things that I want to point out. And you probably can't see this from here. But these are people who had not intended to lose weight. They were there to get their families to eat better without their families knowing it. So we gave them these tips. And the typical person who was told to use a salad plate or a tennis plate for their dinner plate, on average, reported losing an average of about 2 pounds every month. Okay. They were told to eat only in the kitchen or dining room. They lost about 1.5 pounds. And then some things, like a lot of the willpower tips, actually backfired. So when we told people to eat oatmeal as a hot breakfast alternative, you know, there's 100 reasons why that's great. It keeps you full, it's satisfying, it's got fiber. The typical person who did that gained about 0.8 pounds per month. It's kind of crazy. Why do you think that would be? Why would a very common tip that's given by nutritionists cause back for
Because they added to what they were already eating.
That's exactly right. In one case, what happens, people that don't even like oatmeal, they'd be eating it anyway, right? So they're eating this, they're saying, you know, this is so terrible that I'm going to reward myself by having that bagel, by having that bowl of cereal. Another thing was they didn't like it, so they just added a bunch of stuff to it, sugar, cinnamon, stuff like that to it. And in the third case, they'd say, if I'm going to the hassle of making this stuff, I'm not going to eat 3/4 of a cup. No, 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 no. So these things backfired. Here's what was so puzzling and so, I believe, insightful about this is that the first month, nobody lost 2 pounds the first month, 2 pounds the second month, 2 more pounds the third month. It typically went like this. They might lose 1 pound, report losing 1 pound the first month, they might report losing 2 pounds the next month, and they report losing 3 pounds the third month, which didn't really make any sense why this wouldn't be more uniform. And what happened a couple months after we got these results, I was giving a talk. I'll show a couple people here who had permission to use their faces. I was giving a talk in Denver, and afterwards there was a reception, and this woman and her husband, she's a dietitian, she and her husband came up and said, oh man, you know, we made one change about 11 months ago, and I lost 32 pounds, and my husband lost 45 pounds in just 11 months. And the change we made was we make a rule to never sit down for lunch or dinner unless there's both a fruit and a vegetable on the table. Now, we don't have to eat either of them, okay? They just have to be on the table. I mean, it could be a banana that's been there since September, but as long as that's a piece of fruit on the table, it's okay. And you can think of a bunch of reasons why this would have an effect that would lead people to eat better. You might get a little more conscious of whether you put dessert out, you might this and this and this. But I said, wow, that's really cool. I said, but why did you lose 32 pounds and your husband lost 45 pounds? And she goes, she goes, yeah, well, you know what happened is that after a couple months, this started working so well for him that he started saying, oh, this is kind of easy. So he started coming up with other changes. Like, for instance, he instead of drinking beer, he switched it to drink red wine instead. And I said, why would that have any impact? She goes, oh, he doesn't like red wine. And this, we saw this again and again, that there's this weird ripple effect, that if somebody's doing something really consistently, but really consistently, I mean almost every single day, you'd end up seeing these changes, almost, in some ways, almost unintended things off to the side that made this be a much bigger, more effective intervention than you'd otherwise guess. Here's another example. I was in charge of the dietary guidelines for 2 years under the prior administration, and the Secretary of Agriculture, toward the last part of President Bush's term, was from North Dakota, and he asked me one time to go fly out to North Dakota and give 5 talks in 2 days. You say, please do that, sir. Anyway, I was out there, and it was in Grand Forks, and after a talk, this guy was in the back, and he had his coat closed the whole time like this. And at the end of the talk, he kind of walked down, and he said, well, I've been waiting to show you something all night. In which case you just go, oh my God, I just hope it's a gun. He opens his coat, and he says, see the sweater? The sweater was skin tight like 7 months ago. I lost 34 pounds in 7 months. And I only made one change. I eat cottage cheese when I get home from work. No, I'm kind of waiting for the punchline. And he said, oh, well, here's what happens. We used to come home and we'd eat dinner at 6. Because I ate cottage cheese when I get home, I'm not hungry till 7:30. We eat dinner at 7:30 because we eat dinner at 7:30. I don't eat a snack before I go to bed. Yeah, that's kind of interesting, but I said, you know, I just can't think that not eating a snack 5 nights a week is going to cause somebody to lose 5 pounds a month. That's a lot. And he goes, yeah. Oh, she says, well, you know another thing, though, because after a while, we stopped eating dessert on the weekdays. And this is what we see again and again, that if a person does something very consistently, there ends up being this ripple effect that has a far bigger impact than the initial behavior we might target. And when we're looking at some of the changes that we're going to talk about through virtual reality systems, it's pretty easy for us to say, oh, you know, that's not going to solve diabetes. Well, what it might do is it might change things in a little way, which then has this referred impact on other behaviors. So in some of the interventions you're going to be looking at, some of the effect sizes don't look massive, but what we need to do is to look at the additional impact that can happen around those different behaviors. Well, when does practice make perfect? I'm a really bad musician, but I know a lot of friends who are really, really great musicians, and they make